Hi there guys, and welcome to this video on trigonometry. So before we get started, I need you to find this button on your calculator. It's what we call our fractional button. It may look slightly different. This is the latest model, like the Casio's. And these three buttons here, sine, cos and tan. And you probably will need to be familiar with a button that changes it from the standard form, well, I say standard form, it's what we call a standard, to a decimal, third to the decimal. Okay, so trigonometry, you have to learn these three new words. And the first one is opposite. You probably know what that means. Adjacent, you may not have come across this one before. It simply means like next to or alongside. And hypotenuse, which is a really fancy name for the longest side in a right angle triangle. So, trigonometry only works for right angle triangles. And if we start by looking at the opposite, you'll see something appearing. So what I like to imagine is if when there's an angle involved, ignoring the right angle, the other angle is if you imagine yourself trapped inside it and you look out, you look opposite you meet a side, and that is called the opposite side for obvious reasons. So for this one at the bottom here, if I'm trapped inside this angle, I'm looking out, I reach this side would be opposite me. The hypotenuse is really easy, it's the longest side, but that one is also opposite the right angle. So if you draw your arrows, like I'm doing on this video, it does make it very easy indeed. Now this bottom one, a lot of people think this longer diagonal line is the hypotenuse because it normally is diagonal, but it's not, it's always opposite the right angle. Now the adjacent side, I always leave to last because it's the one that's left. You can look at it as it's between the angle and the right angle, but it's much easier to spot the hypotenuse and the opposite and just fill in your adjacent. So why not try and pause it now and think about the labels of these videos, of these questions. So if you've done that, that should be your opposite, that should be your hypotenuse, and the remaining one is the adjacent. But this is what a question will actually look like. So pause it and have a go if you need to. But this question is saying, well, this is 15, this angle is 42, and I want to find this. So before we can do it, we have to label it. So opposite the angle is the opposite. Opposite the right angle, the longer side, the hypotenuse, and therefore the other one is the adjacent. One more. Angle's at the top this time. Opposite the angle is the opposite. Opposite the right angle is the hypotenuse, the longer side, and therefore the other one is the adjacent. So that's a really, really important skill to be able to do. Okay, so we need to know these formulas. It's pronounced so, ka, and toa. So if you think about what we've just done, some of those letters should look a little bit familiar. For example, the O's, they stand for the opposite. The H's stand for the hypotenuse, and the A's stand for the adjacent. And the S, the C and the T, well, they stand for the three buttons I asked you to find at the start of the video on your calculators. Sine, cosine and tangent. You'll notice on your calculator it just says sin, cos and tan. That's purely because there's no room on the calculator, but they are pronounced sine, cosine and tangents. And these, basically the sine one, it allows you to find information on triangles using the opposite and the hypotenuse. The cosine uses the adjacent and the hypotenuse, and the tangent uses the O and the A, the opposite and the adjacent. Okay, so we now need to know which formula to use in different circumstances. So it all comes about from labelling the sides. So opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. Now you'll see here, we're asked to find the hypotenuse. That is involved in the question. We are given the opposite, so that is involved in the question, but we are not told anything about the A, and we're not asked to find it, so we can say the A is not involved. So which one of these three triangles has the O and the H in it? Well, it's this first one, so. So that's the one we're going to be using. Let's have a look at another one. So we have the opposite, we have the hypotenuse, and we have the adjacent. Which one's not involved? The H, the hypotenuse is not involved. So which one of these triangles has the O and the A? This would be this one, the TOA. And it's worth taking your time at this stage, really investing the time to do this bit well, because the rest is easy after this. Label the sides, O, H, and A. Which one's not involved? The O. Some people like to just cross it out at this stage, which is good. The A and the H, so therefore it must be the middle one, the cosine, K. So we have this triangle. Okay, so when you're really happy at doing those, you're not making mistakes, now we have to learn how to use them. So the one we've just done is that one. So we know it's the A and the H. So it's definitely this triangle. Now if you look where the X is here on the A. So when we use these triangles, what we actually do is cover up the A. I've just coloured it in. And you can see what's left is the cosine and the H. And they're on the same line as each other. So what we actually do is multiply them together. So we say the adjacent is the cosine of the angle times the height. Now this little symbol here is theta, it's pronounced. We use it for angles. So there's a formula. We now use the information to put it in. So A is X, the angle is 42, and the H is 15. Now to type this in on your calculator, you'll notice that we want to open a bracket. So always close that bracket and times 15. If you don't close it, it will think you want to do 42 times 15. That's not what we want to do. We want to do cos of 42 and then times that by 15. This would be your answer, and you always have to round it. I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, but they quite often tell you what they want you to round it to. Okay, let's have a look at another one. So, opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent. The adjacent is not being used. Which one has the O and the H? Well, it's the SO. This time I want to find the H. That's where the X is. So let's cover that up on our pyramid. Now we have the O and the sine, but you'll notice they're on different levels. They're on a split level, and you can see this line going across. That helps us remember that we're now going to be dividing. So H is O, the opposite, divided by the sine of the angle. So the O is 8, the angle is 60, and what we can do, that fraction button I showed you at the start, if you press that and using your little D-pad, you can go up and down and type this exactly into your calculator. You can see it looks exactly the same, and once again I've closed the bracket. When you press equals, you may get this as an answer in surd form. You have to press the SD button. That would change it to something that resembles that, and I've just rounded it to 2 decimal places. So that is everything you really need to know about trig for finding sides. In the next video I'm going to show you how to find the angles. Alright, best of luck guys, get some practice in.